Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon, and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League. And we are at peak height right now when it comes to the league. 4 games becoming 3 and what's left of this top flight premiership season, where Linfield pulled it back late. Larne then thumped the Reds by scoring 8. We're going to look at that as well as everything else across 3 divisions, from the chase for 7th, the top flight relegation battle, the mind-boggling championship promotion push. We'll even touch on the PIL this week. Plenty on the menu for your latest weekly edition of Kicking Match. I'll get down to it. I'd like to welcome in my guest this week, football writer and blogger. It's Lewis Bennett.
How's things, Peter?
I'm doing very well. How do you feel at this time of the season right now? It feels to me like it's 4 p.m. on Christmas Day. You're having a great time, but there's a little thing in the back of your head, despite all the good stuff that's still there. Almost the best part of the day is ahead. It's something you've been looking forward to all year. It's a little thing in the back of your head where you're like, this is all going to be over fairly soon. And then, of course, it'll come back next year. But there's that little creeping of, as much as I'm enjoying it and I'm loving it, football's going to go away quite quickly. Are you just so concerned about what's going on right now that you can't even think about that? Or is there something in your head where you're like, wow, there's only like 2-3 games to go and then it will all start over again in a couple of weeks and months?
It really does feel like the business end, across, I suppose, all 3 divisions of the Irish League. There's so many unanswered questions, and it's been a pretty long 9 months. And just coming up to that end, obviously, with it being so tight as has tended to be the case across the Irish League in the past number of years, I'm looking forward to seeing what's in store for the next few weeks.
We have tension everywhere. 3 games to go in the top flight, 2 games to go in the championship. You're the best man to give a shout to talk about this PIL race as well. In the top flight, we have the championship still to be decided. We have this little 7th place to be decided. Relegation isn't a foregone conclusion quite yet. We still have this championship promotion race, which has just got everybody's attention, especially during this big lead up to the final finale. And we have to start at the top of the league, and we'll go to Friday night. Linfield versus the Crews. They take the lead down at Seaview. Then the Crews come out in the second half, really control play, big ball up to Jordan Owens. He scores the header. And up until the final bit of that game, it looked as though that Linfield were going to slip up once again. There was something in the gut, and I had it written out in my phone, and I know this sounds like nonsense right now, written out saying there's something late is going to happen in this game. And it did. It was from a corner. Finlayson gets above everybody else, nods it in. It eventually finds its way across the line. Pandemonium for Linfield fans, and they keep themselves in this title race. We knew these little moments were going to come, and boy, did it deliver on Friday night.
Yeah, there just seems to be something about late season games between Linfield and Crusaders, because there always seems to be something that carries a big significance. If you think a couple of years ago with Ethan Devine, when he scored late at Windsor, it proved so pivotal in the end in terms of nudging Linfield ahead of Cliftonville to win the league. Certainly this season has had its challenges for Linfield. David Graham leaving the general manager and the recent bans that have been issued for crowd disorder. Credit to David Healy, he's completely kept the players' attentions on the pitch. They've continued to win games even when there's been points in the season when they've had players missing due to injury or otherwise, key players being out. They've still found a way to win. Getting that result so late against Crusaders is the thing that David Healy will certainly take most heart from.
The one thing you want to take credit for is sticking young teenager Braden Graham on. He is the man that just has that drive out wide to win the ball, try and bully his way through a collection of players. He wins the corner, and it was that corner which led to that late goal. It was a difficult game for Linfield because, especially in the second half, they just didn't have their way with the game, and the Crews looked like they were going to throw a big whole thing of pepper in another title challengers weekend, and that was going to be big for Linfield because obviously Larne were playing the next day, and they couldn't give Larne that whole day to build themselves up. I know that Larne were going to go into that game against Cliftonville looking to win anyway, but just knowing we have a chance to extend our lead here. So that was big for Linfield. We then flip over to the other side, Larne, who themselves lost to Crusaders. I spoke on this podcast last week about how these next few games, it's boom or bust for Larne. They've got to win this title or they're going to get nothing come the end of the season. Kenny Bruce was atting me, saying, are you doubting my boys? And respectfully said no. But they had big games up, and boy, did they come up trumps on Saturday night. Nobody had this on their bet docket. Larne at Inver Park win out against Cliftonville 8-1. There's a red card in the middle of that, but Larne flex their muscles with gusto. That is a we're not scared of the pressure, boys kind of moment.
Yeah, I think that completely took us all aback, the margin of victory at Inver Park. But credit to Larne, because as you say, Peter, they would have been going in with that game knowing that there's a little bit of extra pressure that can come, obviously, with Linfield winning on the Friday night, but completely cool-headed and just focused on what was going on the pitch. And ultimately, it was a ruthless outcome. You've got Aaron Donnelly, who I think that was his first goal for Larne. Chris Gallagher, even rounding it off with a brilliant hit that just rubber stamped it, and Andy Ryan hat-trick in between. So thoroughly professional from Larne. And I was reading Tiernan Lynch's quotes in the paper there. He's not getting carried away at all, as you can imagine. Whether it's 1-0, 2-0, or 8-1 as it happened, just you've got a big game coming up on Tuesday night, and you've just got to keep your head switched on and keep your eyes on the prize, because ultimately it is only 1 point difference. Cliftonville got the better of them in the Cup, the Irish Cup semi-final, but in the 2 games in the league that have followed, they've bared their teeth, and in spectacular style on Saturday night, that shows that they're definitely not going to go down without a fight. And for me, the key game that it's building up to is Larne and Linfield on the Monday night at Windsor Park.
It's all eyes on game week 37. We've got a round of fixtures, as you alluded to there, before we get there, but it's just balanced and poised beautifully. And a lot of the big players for Larne in particular are revving their engines. The main one being Andy Ryan. 3 goals for him. That very much helps his goal tally for the end of the season. A nice little late push for the Golden Boot, which he now currently sits in that position with those 3 goals, takes him to 21 goals for the year. So that's nice to have him there from the scoring charts point of view. And then, of course, Lee Bonus is adding his little addition to that, as he's third with close to 20 goals this year as well. So we all know that Larne have the players, they have the goal scorers, the mean defence, the high-end midfield talent. But going into this game, as I alluded to there, in their last 4 top 6 meetings in League and Cup, they had only won once. And then to lose to Crusaders at home, there was this pressure of, and then with Linfield winning and overtaking them, are you going to wobble? Are you going to be able to deal with this pressure? Because the one thing we've seen so far in the split is that, particularly in the top end so far, none of these teams are laying down at all. We saw with Crusaders that they've given both the top 2 teams a good old scare and a proper game, and now they will have their eyes on the European playoff, which is on the way. And it's so hard to tell, because that's a big moment for Linfield against Crusaders away, when it looked as though a draw was on the cards. To come back late, that's something different. I saw online, and I kind of agree with this sentiment. I understand where they're coming from, that late header from Finlayson, and he had a go at a header maybe a minute or 2 beforehand in a very similar position, but couldn't find the net. That reminded them of that Warren Point, that early Warren Point game on a Saturday the season before last, where there's a big high ball, it bounces pretty much in the goalmouth, and it was such a dry pitch that day at Warren Point that it bounced over the goal. I was there that day, and I couldn't believe it, but up came Devine with a late header. Linfield went on to win that year, and with Devine that year, could it be Braden Graham? That is that moment that might be forgotten about or might be well remembered to win the corner. Linfield have been here, done this before, but Larne are the reigning champions. This is, I think, for a lot of people, a complete coin toss, because each of them have so many of their strengths, and even the weaknesses that they may have, they're so minor it's truly a marathon, and it's in their own heads. It's in their own hands for both teams, and it's about, can they deliver in the big games. And we see these big pressure late games in previous years, but if both teams win out or match their results on Tuesday night, we are set up for a total shootout. And I think it will likely be a tactical battle between the two. But if we see an early goal in that game at Windsor Park, get your seatbelts buckled, strap in, because we're in for a roller coaster. We've had great run-ins before, but this season is really shaping up to be incredibly memorable.
Oh, 100%. And so often these title races are defined by small moments, an added time goal or a drop point elsewhere. But the way I see it is it's absolutely nip and tuck. Like neither of these teams have much to split them, and they're not the same. Possibly intrinsically, Linfield are just that juggernaut that have been there throughout the entirety of Irish League history, whereas Larne are definitely a bit more new to this setting, and fighting for titles isn't something that they're used to in their past in the way that Linfield have been for many decades. But in the present, Larne definitely have the manager who's got that mentality. I look at even them winning the County Antrim Shield. If that fuels their desire to win trophies, that'll drive them on to go in these latter stages in the league title. But every team has something to play for, and it's no game's a given. And Tuesday night, I think, will be a very revealing night in the Irish League.
The two teams there, Cliftonville and Crusaders, Stephen Baxter was talking after the game against Linfield, and he was proud of the display that his team were able to deliver. But he openly admitted that really now for them, it's about getting all the players healthy and ready for their own shootout. That will be the European playoff. Cliftonville's a different beast. They've got European football. They need now, realistically, to get themselves prepped and ready and injury free ahead of the big Irish Cup that's on the way. I mean, there's no point even talking about the Irish Cup for Linfield because they're so focused on the league, and it'll be interesting looking back how much this plays in to that final game, that cup final. Will Cliftonville be able to use this time to rest and recuperate well, or will Linfield be battled and hardened and ready to take on another big game no matter what way the league title goes? And of course, for Cliftonville, I think it's just mentioned this, there's a lot of great goals in that game with Larne. I thought the red card, like, I didn't hear what was said, but it looks as though it was just another yellow for dissent. Strange one that early in the game, but I guess the amount of times we hear players mouthing off the referees, and if they're not the team you're supporting, you're like, come on ref, give me yellow, what's this, you can't be saying that. So that's a tough one to take if you're a Reds fan, but you'll need big players like that later on in the game. Do you have a pick of the goals? I know there's so many quite tasty and great ones that were there. I think the Miller one is going to be underrated, just that falls and it looks like he's going to thump it and he just trickles it in to the right hand side of the keeper. I think my favourite is the back heel from Bonus into Ryan, but the final one from Gallagher is a thunderbolt as well.
Yeah, for me, it's the Gallagher one. I just like goals that are hit hard and hit true. And ultimately, it kind of just rubber stamped it in the end. But I mean, the scoreline, I'm still trying to process it, to be honest. 8-1. It's just seeing a demolition job like that, at this late stage of the season against top teams, two of the top three teams in the league, is just astonishing. But yeah, I'd probably go for Gallagher's just on the sheer venom of it.
I think if you're a Cliftonville fan, though, you'll take that 8-1 in some sort of Foystian deal to get yourself even just into the cup. Forget winning it to get in. You're like, yeah, we'll get thumped. I'll give you 6 points across 2 games if we get into the final. Yep, take that, no bother at all. So Cliftonville have bigger things now in their minds to look forward to than the next couple of games. We'll see how they get themselves prepped for that. To focus just on these two, Linfield and Larne, story-wise is interesting because there's neither really you would consider the underdog. I think maybe Linfield are the team that people are not betting for. Larne might be the favourites, but there's no David versus Goliath. This is two well-funded, well-stocked, well-drilled teams trying to, as much as they can, strive for perfection and excellence. It'll probably feed into your comments throughout the podcast here, but Lewis, what does your gut tell you in how this is going to all play out. How is it going to finish? Because what's interesting for me from a spectator and someone who follows the league is like it's a guaranteed, the end of the season is a guaranteed thrill ride. This is just not going to peter out. There will be drama and there will be something. It's like I'm about to launch myself into an indoor roller coaster and I have no clue where the loops are coming, but I know they're going to come. So with that being said, without getting into the nitty gritty of the games that will happen and how they'll come together, who is going to have the Gibson Cup come the end of this month?
On paper, you'd probably say Lauren have the deeper squad
I agree.
in terms of personnel. Maybe they just have that edge in terms of quality that they have at their reserves. But by the same token, David Healy, what he's got, for example, out of Kyle McLean, who is hitting unprecedented scoring levels, and Jimmy Mulgrew, who seems to have really rolled back the years this year in his performances in midfield. He's got every drop out of what he's had at his disposal. And just with that mentality at Linfield that he's built and the culture, that goes a long way in football. I do like Linfield. I would tip Linfield for it just because of that mentality. That's exactly what Linfield is built on, just a club that competes for trophies, and to have that possibility of getting 3 in the one season, I think is just it brings the best out of them for me.
Well, I'll give you kudos there to stick your neck on the line. It's a 50-50 for a lot of people. Personally, I think right now, and we're a week better with the knowledge that we have based on the games that we saw over the weekend, I still feel like it's absolutely in Lauren's corner. The ball's with them. It's there in their court, mainly because they can go into that game against Linfield and they can draw, and that's a huge benefit to them, that they can draw and then just win out in the other games, which could then become more of kind of dead rubbers as they go along. So that's a big benefit. And also a big benefit for them is that on Tuesday night, Linfield can win, Lauren can lose, and Lauren can then still win again and overtake them. So that's the benefit that you have by that 1 point. And it's now another season where games at Windsor Park between these two are going to be pivotal, and they've been pivotal for Lauren. I remember that game in October in 22, which then was an important win for them. They won there in 23 late on, so now it's poised for them to deliver on the big stage at the National Stadium once again. So we're split, and this is why it's such a great title race moving forward. The rest of the games that we saw, Coleraine 2-1 against Glentoran. They still, this as a stat I bring out every single week on the podcast because it just keeps getting extended. Coleraine remain undefeated since their takeover. Amazing. Another great little brace from Shevlin. Somewhat handed to him on a plate for both of them. But as a player who many people were wondering was McGonagall's arrival the potential marker for him being ushered out, absolutely not. He looks to be, on Saturday, still has the quality and the ability to be an excellent predatory striker. I'm sure he'll love to get goals. I'm sure Coleraine fans will be buzzing for him to get goals so that they have plenty of players scoring going in to the split now. And you must say, Coleraine are starting to look really good when it goes into these games. They've beaten Glentoran. They're doing bits against everybody else. It'll be interesting to see how they go against the Crews, but they look fit, they look healthy, they look enthused, they look motivated. It's like their season only started 2 months ago. And Oren Kearney looks like a refreshed, rejuvenated man, and they've really embraced this mini-season mentality that seems to be just emanating from up there. They'll not be playing all their games based on their league position up at the showgrounds, which will be hindrance to them, but it very much looks like it's going to be a three-way battle rather than some sort of underdog run from Coleraine. They look dangerous.
Fit and healthy, I think, is key, Peter. Coleraine had that horrible run earlier in the season, and it was no coincidence that the majority of the games were played while Matthew Shevlin was out injured. He is so crucial as a classic predator. 2 cheap goals from Glentoran's perspective to give away, but you've still got to take those opportunities when they're presented to you, and certainly Shevlin is a specialist at that. Oren Kearney, I think, does deserve massive credit because, yes, it's been a turbulent season for Coleraine. It's not been their most memorable on the whole, but to be able to come back from that run, I think it was 1 win in 14 games in 90 minutes, people would look at that as unacceptable. But for Kearney to then inspire a response, and he was backed in the market, obviously, with Jack Scott coming in and Rory Brown between the sticks, getting the players back on board and getting their heads focused on what was to come rather than looking at what's been and gone. I think he deserves massive credit for that. And they are going in to the European playoffs with momentum as we speak.
Will there be a fourth team in this European playoff spot? It will need to be Carrick or Dungannon if that is to be the case. Going down to Section B, or the lower side of the split, pretty much big wins for all the contenders. Loughgall, Carrick and Dungannon all win out. Loughgall are able to beat out Glenavon again at home, thanks to a 3-1 win. Actually, a nice little late goal from Loughgall. So they're looking good as well, as much as they can't make it into the playoff by all accounts. Carrick, they take care of Ballymena, as they seemingly always do. And that's a big win for Carrick, because they really needed to get back on track. And Dungannon are now coming up from the rear with all these big games for them in their hands now. They're coming up from the rear to try and do a bit of business here. We'll just stick with the 7th place for now. Loughgall on 42, Carrick on 41, Dungannon on 38. It's just about who can be consistent in the final 3 games and get a bit of momentum. You'd say the Swifts perhaps have the momentum, but they'll need it if they are to have this late surge, because they're going to need to take over the 2 teams ahead of them. It's clear to me that Loughgall aren't just going to give this up. I think that they've enjoyed this season and they're happy to fight on. Do you have a favourite amongst those 3 to snatch it?
I do like Dungannon, and I've said this before about Rodney McAree, is that I think he has that caliber. He is a top manager, and he got Dungannon into the playoffs, for example. He obviously won the playoff last season as Glentoran manager. You think earlier in the season, when they were sort of struggling for goals, they've hit their groove, even with Matthew Lusty having been out injured, which I think probably has been a defining factor, because he had been one of the top scorers in the league. But I think it's symbolic of Dungannon's improvement from last season. I think they've scored more than double the amount of goals that they did the entirety of last year. Certainly, I think Dungannon can make that late surge. Likewise, Carrick, a bit of feel good, the takeover at the start of the year, and having now broken their Premiership points record for a 2nd consecutive season, that's a brilliant achievement for Stuart and his side, and obviously another win for them against Ballymena on Saturday. If I were to pick a preference for 7th place, I do think Loughgall can throw a spanner in the works.
It's similar to the Larne thing with Loughgall, is that they have the points and they have the slippage, and they could take on anybody and seem happy just to take on anybody, and they have goals up top. They've got a steely enough defence at times. Like losing Keelan Loughran isn't going to be helpful on that side, for unfortunately just the red mist ascended, and he got sent off there against Glenavon. But they just have skill and quality at the bottom of the table, or in that bottom half. It's about the big players delivering, isn't it? And you can see with Loughgall, they have Ferris and they have Benji McGee. Nice little goal from Benji McGee, just doing things that he loves to do, get the ball at his feet, running at a defender and squeezing his way one-on-one. Carrick have, we all know what Danny Gibson could do. Great goal from Ben Tilney, who's getting back into the team as well in that game against Ballymena. And then Reece Marshall coming back could be pivotal. They have little gems like we've seen with McGee moving on to Linfield as well. There's just players like that in this Dungannon side. And I think for Dungannon, and we'll talk about it later in the podcast, this game on Tuesday night is going to be key against Loughgall. Unless they get a victory there, they're pretty much out of it with 2 games to go. In fact, points wise they wouldn't be, but that's the hurdle, because they've already taken care of Carrick Rangers. If they can win against Loughgall, then they have Glenavon, who look as though they're pretty, now they're 1 point behind Dungannon, but they're not going to be able to get into Europe and just have that extra hill to climb there, especially on the goal difference point of view. That are they going to be as much as a tricky task later in the season? And then they have Ballymena, of course, who could be difficult, or could be sitting there trying to prep themselves for a playoff. So Dungannon are the interesting team to look at. Carrick, it's in their hands, because they've got that game against Loughgall, the tasty one in this fabled game week 37. So it's just we need more information, even though there's only 3 games to go, to really nail it. Just a moment on the bottom of the table. Games are running out now for Newry. Ballymena are their dream of Dundela making it a no playoff season for them looks to be fading. That would be the same sentiment for Newry, who look as though that automatic relegation is very much on the cards. That game against Dungannon at home, all games are important, but it had an extra bit of impetus by the fact that it's a home game. They've beaten the Swifts before, and unfortunately, it's not a great goal to concede. Somewhat from far out, just trickles its way through everybody and evades the keeper, and then late penalty there. It doesn't look clear from the footage why Barney McKeown got sent off. Was that another case of mouthing off? But as much as Ballymena losing to Carrick doesn't help their purpose anymore, Newry's results are almost more important to Ballymena right now than their own. And by the time these two face off, even if Newry was to get that victory, which is not a given, perhaps come next Saturday, it may be done and dusted and already wrapped up if Ballymena were to get a result. So it's looking good for Ballymena, despite the fact that they don't look particularly sterling themselves.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple situation in the end. Ballymena better Newry's result on Tuesday night, and that's effectively them locked on for the playoff. A draw combined with a Newry defeat would effectively confirm Newry's relegation. Wouldn't quite mathematically, but the goal difference is so superior to Newry's that they would be in a comfortable enough position to be preparing for the playoff if of course there is to be one. Newry will be mathematically relegated if Ballymena win and they don't win, and that'll be them making a return to the championship after a couple of seasons in the top flight. It's difficult for Newry because they know where the problems lie. Defensively, they've conceded 88 goals this season. That's by far and away the worst defensive record in the league, and it's been a recurring problem that they just haven't been able to keep the goals out. And
I don't know if it's the same stat or if it still remains, but for a while it was the worst defensive record in Europe when it comes to top flight football. So
yeah, it's not entirely within their own hands, and I think Ballymena, it's a very young Ballymena team. It's a young team with an inexperienced manager. Nothing's signed and sealed, but I think they are in a safe enough position that they can start preparing for a potential playoff against Bangor as it stands. That could all change.
1 point pretty much gets it for Ballymena, in my eyes, whatever way it would come. A win would, not mathematically, but pretty much rubber stamp it. You're looking at Newry to go on some heroic last 3 games, getting 9 points kind of run to deny that. Some sort of West Brom 2004 style run. And I don't want to start summarising something that hasn't already happened, but it's been a difficult and hard to watch end for Newry's time now in the top flight from the 2 years, if it is to all peter out. Just before we get into the championship, which I know you'll have a lot to say about, a lot of big things happening this week elsewhere in the league. When it comes to news, we saw the Irish Cup pretty much sell out, or at least allocations are being sold out. Accounts are that it's going to be 15,000 when all's said and done at the National Stadium for the Irish Cup final. That's impressive that it happened so quickly. I know a lot of people touted this to be quite a big glamour tie when it comes to a cup final between these two, that it was going to draw a lot of interest. I'm sure there's a big push, if you do get to that full sellout across all allocations, to then extend it to potentially a full stadium sellout. There's huge security costs that already are being incurred by putting so many people in that stadium. Could we push it beyond? We'll just have to see. But that's incredible, isn't it, to see tickets sell so quickly and in such high numbers. We've seen, oftentimes, from my perspective, these massive attendances for the FAI Cup in the Republic, and it's often been a shame that we're sitting there trying to reach 10,000. So when you have two big teams like this with loyal, passionate, large fan bases, for them to come out so quickly out of the gates and pretty much fill the stadium. It's great to see and it's encouraging.
Yeah, I almost couldn't believe it when I read it, just how quickly the tickets sold out. Big credit to Cliftonville and Linfield, and their support bases for snapping up the tickets so quickly. Reflective, I think, of the sense of occasion. For Cliftonville, this has been their holy grail, I suppose. They've won one Irish Cup in 115 years, which to me is always one of the most eyebrow-raising and astonishing statistics in any Irish League archive. And then obviously, it's the first Irish Cup final between these two clubs in 90 years. Two clubs packed absolutely with history and heritage and with the support bases that I think absolutely reflect that. So I just have to say absolute credit to both support bases for making it an occasion, coming out in their numbers and going out to support their teams, and ultimately on the day may the best team win.
So that's on the way. Don't have time to go into all of his big career. Significant news from a Leeds point of view, from a Northern Ireland international team's point of view, but I just wanted to mention Stuart Dallas, unfortunately having to retire after a lengthy injury battle that unfortunately is now a key reason that his career is ending. I just want to mention him because I feel as though from my time as an Irish League viewer, that one, he was an amazing and very memorable Irish League player who then went on to go into the Premier League and play at the Euros, and I think he was somewhat of a modern trailblazer. We have seen players go from the Irish League in decades gone by and eventually make their way up to the Premiership. It's a very rare thing, and I know a lot of people are saying, well, Gareth McCauley did something very similar. It was a different kind of track, but this was, in my view, at the time, a young player who became a star of the league that was a massive part of a championship winning side, who then went on to play in England, Brentford, and others, and worked his way up into the Premiership. And I just think when we didn't even see a lot of players moving from this division to then go be professionals in England or even Scotland, I think his career will, at least from my point of view, be a very memorable one to look upon as someone who he went and he did it and he's impressive. And it's very sad to see anybody's career, and football's a short career, be over. But I think the nature of his career is very memorable, and I think as we now see other players move on to England, I'll always, and there was, like I said, many beforehand, but when we see players move on from the league that were stars in the league, and I know Liam Boyce was of that era as well, and then Gavin White came after him. Well done, Stuart Dallas, because it was not an easy path to get where he was, and he went to the top of the game.
Yeah, I was gutted to read that in the week. Not entirely unexpected, I suppose, but disappointed because in his time playing for Northern Ireland, Stuart Dallas is one of my favourite players to watch for Northern Ireland, like ever. Just a player who just had that work ethic and that character. You'd stick him basically anywhere on the pitch, bar goalkeeper, and you could guarantee that he'd do a job for you. Started off with Coke United, it's different, I suppose, maybe that you would see with young players these days. Benji McKee, I think, would maybe be probably the closest modern example of a player.
There's something about him and Benji McKee. You're absolutely right. Him as PSNI player, Coke United to the Premiership and beyond.
Yeah, I see the similarity there. And to see him go and be Leeds Player of the Year, be so dependable under Marcelo Bielsa for that high energy style that just symbolises him. There's moments I remember internationally, the goal against Azerbaijan in World Cup qualifying in Baku. It's just the lung-busting energy to go right to those dying embers and make a big impact. To me, that just summed him up. It's such a shame that he got injured because he was, he's 30 years old at the time. You're thinking he's still got a lot of legs in him. But before that, for me, he was probably, in this era, when Northern Ireland obviously transitioning to a younger team, for me, he would have been captain material personally. Mm-hmm. I would have had him as Stephen Davis's successor as captain, were he available.
You could have seen him still playing for a championship side when he's 36. He just had that drive and that work ethic, and he really dragged himself up through all of that, and a brilliant player to watch, always impressive. I think everybody was always gunning for him and supporting him as he had that rise up the leagues and there into the into the Premiership with Leeds. Leeds fans are calling him a legend and an icon at the club. That's amazing, isn't it? It's just great to see, and he is the blueprint. There you go for whoever the next Irish League player is. Could be Benji McGee. Could be plenty of other players. There's been many that have went before you, but I'm sure many would look at it and go, if I could have half the career that he had, I will have done very, very well. Seems to be a nice guy, and yeah, all the cards were stacked. It felt as though against him, and he made and had an excellent career in football. Lewis, this was a big part of the reason I brought you onto the podcast this week. I've been saving you up so we could get into this. The Championship, another big weekend. There's only 2 more games to go now when it comes to this push for promotion. We had 4 going into this last big run in the split. We all know them. Portadown, Dundela, Institute, Bangor, all on different sets of form. And after the weekend, it looks as though Portadown are in the box seat. After a dreadful performance and set of results for them last weekend, they went out once again. All the results pretty much go their way, and it's theirs to lose now when it comes to the title, it looks.
Yeah, 4 points clear. It's pretty simple now. What will secure them promotion? They just have to beat Dundela, and then anything else that happens is made redundant. I think a draw between Bangor and Institute will also see them go up. But yeah, now Curry, I think he'll have nothing else on his mind but winning against Dundela. Professional performance, I think, from them at the weekend to beat Harlan and Wolf Welders. Build a bit of breathing space in this really nip and tuck race. And credit to them, they've hit form, I think, at exactly the right time. And this is something that, to be honest, I would have expected to have happened earlier in the season with Portadown, is that with now Curry teams, there's just a point where it clicks. And I felt that last season, the tail end of the Premiership, when they went on that run. It was just a bridge too far for them in the end, but they just hit that purple patch in form. I get the same sense that they're ending the season on a high now. Anna was a bump in the road last week. I think Anna picked up 8 points in the 12 games, which is very impressive. But you sink your swimming in those sorts of moments, and Portadown have came back with a fighting response and the cusp of the title, which would live up to the favourites tag. Coming into the season, I think they were the one team that you would have probably said that anything other than promotion would have been constituted failure. But now that they're on the cusp and have that chance to secure promotion and then an immediate return to the Premiership, certainly they've the job to do against Dundela, who they've hit a bad run of form recently, but they'll still be fired up to get one over their old manager. But certainly with Portadown, they have that run of momentum that's been built up, sometimes through late victories, and just they have it in them to see it over the line.
It's this split in the Championship in particular has been thrilling, and week to week it's changed so much. As you hinted to there, what is that I hear? Is that Anna United's music? Because we now have, if Portadown are going to run away with it, and this weekend's results could completely flip this on its head. But Anna United, due to this mega run they've been on since January, are sitting looking up 2 points off second. They technically, and I hopefully have got my maths right, they could technically still win this league. I mean, I don't think that is even close to happening. It would have to be some strange selections of results, but you add in a random win somewhere in this season and they are second, looking up with a real chance of winning the league. It's just they have been the stick in the wheel for all of these teams, and they've now won out against Portadown, Dundela and Institute, and Bangor will not want to see them coming their way. So they're on the rise here, very much in play to get second place. Institute, after looking great there last week, that loss to Anna United puts them now 4th, 65 points. Dundela losing to Bangor, they now slip down to 3rd on 66. Many people were predicting this would happen, but the last 4 games it's been draw and 3 losses. Unfortunately, they have really fallen away, but they still have 2 games to try and revive this season, and a bit like Larne, it's title or bust for them, and the other teams around them, Institute, Anna, Bangor, even Portadown, but particularly all those teams sans Portadown, Dundela, unless they're first, are kind of just a buffer. They're only really a buffer because if they are to come second, then third is still the one they're fighting for. So all these teams will be looking around them, and Dundela, as you saw last week, Anna going to Portadown, they can be beaten at home. This stretch of 4 games at home for Portadown has set it up really nicely for them, and they're just a win. Not even technically, they are not even just from a feeling point of view or an all but point of view, a win and they're home, and they've got the title, and they can celebrate on Saturday, and they can party all the way to Friday. Of the other teams there, let's talk about your Bangor. They lost 3 in a row leading up to the split, and then the first game of the split, and there were big games. 2 losses to Portadown and a loss to Institute, and they've turned it around. 2 wins in a row, a massive one against Dundela coming back there, and now there. And the goal difference was going to be key here. They're now sitting second on goal difference. They'll feel as confident as pretty much anybody from a nerves point of view, from a just feeling they can also do it, and a belief point of view. How are you feeling, Mr. Bennett?
2 convincing wins, Peter. I thought against the Wilders last week, I thought we were outstanding. It was a really good 90-minute performance amid very blustery conditions, and that was our final home game of the season, pending any potential playoff. I don't know if I want to mention that word just yet, but
We'll get to that.
yeah, just that was a really convincing performance, obviously, to bounce back the winning ways after those 3 successive defeats. And against Dundela, again, similar story, second half, again, really convincing. And I thought that showed the character. It is a team that is very much built on strong characters and players that aren't phased whenever they suffer a setback, and a manager who isn't phased when they suffer a setback. And I think that's certainly proven to be the case, because against Dundela in February, losing 3-2, it wasn't a good performance on the day. Scoreline probably flattered us, and Dundela did well at sort of nullifying us, and we tried to play a direct brand of football on what is a very compact pitch, and Dundela were certainly played into their hands, but slightly different style at the weekend against them, and it sort of reaped its rewards. Ben Cushney, who's had a couple of injury issues this season, it's been a wee bit stop-start for him, but for me, there's no question of his quality, and he scored a really, really good free kick that opened the scoring from our point of view and got us back on level terms. Big Lewis Francis, who's, 10 goals from centre half, and before he's even turned 20, the kid is unbelievable. He scored the goal that puts us 2-1 up, and then Ben Arthurs, who's ever dependable, always finds a way to score, it seems like, and whatever level he's playing at, he just rains goals. I think he's coming up to 40 total goal contributions across the season, which for a player in their first season in the championship, I think is outstanding. A really good game at a place that we were beaten, and deservedly beaten, before, and it'll be the same story against Institute next week. Up at the Brandywell, when we played them, they beat us 4-0, which is one of the few times I would say this season that we have been outclassed by genuinely the other team was a class above. Fair play, you deserve the win. But it'll be a different story there, I hope. And then just talking about like Savannah, since the turn of the year, it just seems that they've been brilliant. They're energetic. They've got a very capable manager. They've got that experience of playing in the playoffs before, the past couple of seasons. And they've really forced their way into the frame when I think a lot of people weren't really expecting them to. Institute, who are very capable, a very impressive season for them when you consider they were only spared the playoff because of the whole war on points situation last year. They've completely reinvented themselves, and a lot of very capable young players, and in particular the centre back Sean Leppard, who for me arguably the best defender in the league this season. The guy,
Lot of hype about him.
Yeah, real physical, really good in the air, tough to play against. Dundela, obviously, they're unable to achieve promotion, but as we've alluded to earlier, Peter, if they finish second, that completely changes the picture of the relegation promotion playoff. If they finish second, then Ballymena are safe. Certainly, I don't think it can be underestimated that if they have a strong end to the season, it'll still very much impact the whole picture. So yeah, we'll wait and see what happens there. Obviously, I think they'll be fired up for playing Portadown because, it is that sense of occasion that there is the chance that Portadown can win the league. Niall Curry, obviously former Dundela manager, he left Dundela for Portadown, and the sense I get is that there isn't an awful lot of love lost from that moment. So I think that'll be a very charged game, and I don't think certainly it won't feel like Dundela are playing for pride in that game. Portadown are going to have to work for the points, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in the final few weeks of the season. And certainly, it's pretty much a lock that the playoff will go down to the final day, and it's all hell could break loose.
100%. It is going to go down to the final day for that playoff spot, regardless with what happens with Portadown. I mean, we've seen them do it before. We've seen them shoot themselves in the foot, tie themselves up in knots. For my money, all Portadown need is a draw, and they are all but in there. They're on 70 points. A draw then would knock Dundela out of winning the league. Then Bangor would need to win both their games to overtake them. A draw would then set that game up with Institute, where Institute, if they were then to beat Bangor, they couldn't overtake Portadown. The only way they could then win the league is to beat Portadown in the final game of the season and somehow overturn a, what is it, 6 goal, and it will all depend on the other results, 6-5 goal turn. But of course, when you're playing against Portadown, wouldn't that be like the maddest end of the season where Portadown draw against Dundela, feel like they're there, Institute score by a difference of 3, and then they take over Portadown on goal difference by beating them at home, or like a goal could change it. So that, like, I'm trying to think of all the permutations here. Talking about the games that are coming up this Saturday, the final Saturday game of the championship. It's the game week 37, the hyped up game week in both leagues. Anna United take on the Welders. The Welders who still have to fulfill all these fixtures against teams in the bottom of the division in Dergview and Knockbreda, I believe. So they've got games to go. Their key motivation, well, they gave it a go against Portadown, but still lost 3-1. I'm sure their main motivation would to make sure that Dundela, that final game of the season, that Dundela does not get themselves the title. But if Anna United were to win that, that gives them 67 points. The Bangor Institute game is squeaky bum time already. Already, it's 90 minutes of squeaky bum time. Institute 65, Bangor on 66. Of course, Bangor has this huge mini point in their goal difference, which simply won't get caught. So if whoever wins in that game, if there is a winner, will all but knock out. In fact, it'll depend for Institute. Bangor win, Institute are out of the promotion race. They're out. They're gone. If Institute win, they overtake Bangor, regardless of the Dundela result. They'll overtake Bangor and will be 2 points above them going into that game against Portadown. So it's set up nicely for Portadown, bar this Dundela game where they have first Dundela and then Institute. And of course, we have this weird situation where Institute would rather, if Institute win against Bangor and Dundela, even if Dundela beat Portadown, Institute kind of need Portadown to win. It's strange. And then, of course, Anna United going in. Until we know the Anna United result, we just don't know. Because then, if Bangor win and Anna win and Portadown win, which I think might be, well, it depends. Institute Bangor game's different. But they'll probably be the favourites. But we then have the second huge showdown. Anna United versus Bangor. Winner goes through. It's like a semi-playoff before the playoff, and it will all depend on the results that happen on Saturday of who's in there. I don't think Anna can jump up to second this weekend, I believe, because of the goal difference. The best they can do is win and then Bangor draw, and then they would both be sitting there on 67 points with the goal difference for Bangor being there. So I can't call this because no one called Anna getting all the way up here. No one called them beating Portadown. That win for Bangor probably benefited Portadown, didn't it? For Bangor beating Dundalk probably helped Portadown in the end.
Yeah, you would say so. just with getting Dundee off the proverbial monkey's back, proverbial shamrock back, if you like. 4 points clear, obviously, as we've said, win gets in the league.
In either game,
Yeah,
one win and they've got it.
I'm desperately hoping that Anna game's a dead rubber. um, you know what? 3 wins and all of them away from home as well. They had 4 away games coming into the split, and for them to perform as they have been, even without even having home advantage, it feels like they have had a bit of pressure lifted off them, and just Kieran McGurgan's told them do what you do, and they've went out and they've got results. So all credit to them for being in the position that they are and playing the Welders. Probably expect them to be favourites for that game and pile on a bit more pressure. But yeah, as we've seen with this league, anything can happen and it's just chaos.
Like a Bangor win, they've nailed themselves on to a playoff minimum. So that's the motivation against Institute. Here is a third crazy scenario. Portadown lose to Dundela. Bangor beat Institute. We have two teams on 69 points, Dundela and Bangor. Bangor would be above Dundela on goal difference. Portadown have 1 point on both of them. And then you have Portadown Institute, Anna against Bangor, and the Welders against Dundela. and Anna are still in the mix there, trying to perhaps sneak above both Dundela and Bangor. So, could you imagine going into that Friday night where you have what would be 67 with Anna, Dundela on 69, Bangor on 69, and Portadown on 70. Like, Portadown fans are sitting there going, "This is great. We're happy as Larry, and all we need is one win." That win might seem like Mount Everest over the next 180 minutes of their season. This is just thrilling, isn't it?
Oh man, I think they need to install showers wherever they go just for the amount of sweating that'll be done. But yeah, I can remember Bangor being in the playoff a couple of years ago, and it was the final game of the season against Armagh City, and that was winner takes all. Whoever won that game got the playoff. 1-1 going into, I think it was final 5 minutes, and then Ben Arthur scored twice late, and we got the playoff in the end. But just there is that sense of occasion, that real pressure that spurs teams on. It can, you sink or you swim. I've said that a few times. You sink or you swim. Just in those pressure moments, if it does come down to the final day, and you've got a situation where you've got 3 teams, potentially 4, that can mathematically finish in a playoff. It's just, I'll tell you one thing, you're just frantically looking at your phone, and you're probably spending more time looking at your phone at results elsewhere than you are in the game. But just it's such a pulsating time of the season, and genuinely there is very few things, if any, in Irish League football that capture the attention like a playoff. Even the racing date and the playoff itself, it is just like a roller coaster of emotions, and especially because it takes place over 2 legs and you've got the games leading up to it. And with it being such a quick turnaround, it's just, you could put the emotions in a bottle and the emotions would just unscrew themselves. Like, it's just, it is chaos.
It's chaos. Like, Lewis, there's probably other permutations and scenarios that I'm not even thinking about. I'm even looking at one where Institute beat Bangor, I'm sorry, and Portadown win out against Dundela and they win the league. Institute jumps above both of them, and then you have that game between Institute and Portadown, this one that was hyped up as the Institute rollover to get the playoff spot is what was being a scenario which could happen. Portadown might go, we've had a great week, Institute, come on down and party with us, and here's and Institute win out against a Portadown team who are sitting at the side of the pitch with cigars, They don't care, they're celebrating every Institute goal that goes in, whatever, they're having a party. Like, it's just, oh my goodness, how do these things all fall? You are for me one of the key experts on this league. You follow it week in, week out. Names that other people don't know. I know you're torn because of the Bangor connection, and I think the feeling is now that Portadown will even if it's by falling over backwards through a hedge, they will win this league. That 4 points cushion is really helpful to them. They will win this league by hook or by crook. I would say Bangor are the favourites because of just that Institute result. Do you back them? And who, if you're not going to back them, who's your biggest concern? Anna, probably?
Yeah, just because it's Anna on the final day. Yeah, it is a case that everything will be very clear on Saturday after everything's come and gone. But for Bangor, we've lost so many playoffs over the years. Like, it's some sort of curse. If there's situations where you've Larne in Irish Cup finals, Cliftonville in the Irish Cup, situations where teams just can't seem to find any joy. Bangor in promotion playoffs is pretty much right up there. I would say that whoever gets the playoff would certainly give most likely Ballymena United a game. Like it would
I
be
think they're the favourites against Ballymena, if I'm being honest. Not
it's
massively,
so
but
close.
I think they would have the momentum and be favourites.
Yeah, it's so close. But whoever gets the playoff, you've got good teams here, experienced managers and squads that in some cases have been very close knit. It is a case like the playoff, I thought it last season with Anna and they almost made it in the end. I was at that second leg against Dungannon and Dungannon deserved to win. But the way Anna managed the game, they were in it right until the final whistle. The championship as a whole is as good, I think, as it's been in a very, very long time in terms of the quality of players that are in there. There's absolutely Premiership standard footballers across every single team in that top six. As I said, Ballymena have 22 points and they've struggled for goals, but you wonder as well, there's an element of the unknown. How could that cope against the championship defence? Will their style of play potentially be better suited to playing against the championship team? It's open for discussion. And likewise with Newry, who do have experience at this level, who do have last season's championship top goal scorer, if they sneak into the playoff, I do think there'll be an element there. They have players that have been at this level before and who've performed at this level before, and I think they would make it difficult. But honestly, if you were asking me now, regardless of whichever team made the playoff, be it Institute, Anna, or Bangor, I do think it would be sweat dripping until last second of extra time in the second leg, like it would be.
They've been close games regardless. These
Yeah.
playoffs in the past few years, particularly the Anna ones. That's 2 seasons in a row they've had. Could they make it three? They have a tight game against Portadown where Anna were suddenly looking at themselves going, "Oh my goodness, we're in a playoff." They come back the next year and a bit of fortune, they're able to, because of the warm point situation, they're able to have a strange game against Dungannon Swifts due to it being played like pretty much a month after the season. And I mean, they all of a sudden made it a crazy game, and Dungannon are then made to work to kind of score a couple of goals to see them out here. So they actually have the experience and want to play us into it all. So, oh, Lewis, it really has captured the imagination with a lot of people, and it's been getting more and more airtime in this podcast in the past few weeks. You've made your prediction with Bangor. I can see why, and look, I tipped them to win the league a couple of weeks ago, and looks so Portadown have come back to thwart them. Just a couple of insights. I'm sure by when a lot of people are listening to this podcast, they'll be announced. But we are, from like an industry point of view, there is the Northern Ireland Football Writers Dinner next Saturday, which is when they'll be giving out the Northern Ireland Football Writers Awards. Last year we saw Leroy Miller win the one for the top flight player of the year. We saw Ben Murdoch win the championship one. We'll chat very briefly about the PIL in a second, but who would you predict might be the three players? Like I had no vote and have no indication of what it might be, but who would you say are the three players that might be on the list for the championship player of the year? I'm thinking Ben Arthur's, Jordan Jenkins, and one other.
Potentially, so I would think probably a Portadown player like Ryan. I think you could fit in Zach Barr, Ryan Mays, Eamon Fife. I think all of them would make credible cases. If you were to go for a Bangor player, for me, you've got Ben Arthurs as probably the standout for the goals that he scored, and likewise Dundela, Jordan Jenkins. I've been thoroughly impressed anytime I've seen him play.
That's a big recovery season for him. He's had a difficult couple of years, and to get back scoring big goals after going from Glentoran to Dungannon for a bit, put it down for a bit, to nail himself down and have a Adam Sally-esque season in the championship. His stock is as high as it's been in years and will be highly sought after, I would imagine, come next year.
Yeah, he's always been a player that's had that turn of pace about him, and he's got good footwork. And certainly I think he'll be in demand among. If his future's not with Glentoran, then it'll be with somebody else in the Premiership for me, because he is that level of player. He is somebody who can score goals at that level and has, that pace, that footwork, and scoring instinct. He can score different types of goals and can just generally run off the shoulder of defenders and make a nuisance. He's certainly been one of the best players that I've seen in this league, and I do think, if he doesn't end up at a Premiership club, next season, I'd be astounded.
So who's your pick then? Do you think is it between Jenkins and Arthur's based on just the season they've had?
I would have to factor in a Portadown player, and I would say Eamon Fife. I've been very, very impressed by Eamon Fife whenever I've seen him play. Just his general sort of industry and his footwork and his general eye for goal. He's somebody that picks out holes in opposition defenses out of nothing. And Ben Arthur's, I'll always vouch for him. Like he's a modern legend of Bangor Football Club and closing in on all time second highest goal scorer. And to me, players that good, they're not players that you see at clubs like Bangor very often. And just
And he'll be here for the next 2 years, all accounts. That's a big contract.
I signed to 2026. That was great news. It's going to be a very close race. I couldn't pick any player to be an absolute clear favorite. And I mentioned him there earlier. Sean Leopard at Institute has been thoroughly impressive for me. I think certainly he's another player that could have a few interested parties looking at him for next season in the Premiership too.
Actually, I'm just looking at last year, and you saw the team of the year in the championship was Turker, Murdoch, and Pablo Andrade for Lockall. McGuinness was right back. Walsh and Ball completed the defence from Warren Point. Dillon was at Warren Point in the middle. Clark for Balder Mallard. Taylor out wide for Anna. And then it was Ferguson and Sally up top, Welders and Ards at the time. So that the team of the season will be the one I'm more interested in. I think Portadown players will probably take up more of the team of the season, but perhaps it'll be a weird mix. Perhaps they'll defeat each other. Like you said, who you'd think of Portadown players in there, but who is it? Is it Fife, or is it Mays, or is it Barr, or is it someone like that? They've had a few players that have got a lot of goals, but perhaps haven't been the main standout players in the same way that Jenkins and Arthurs is. So you'd probably say it will be a Portadown player, and it might be Fife, just due to having a nice late surge that he's had this season, scoring the goal in the League Cup. So that's my prediction for the three. And if it was to be Ben Arthurs, that'd be a nice thing for him, because he would be back-to-back PIL Player of the Year and then Championship Player of the Year. I would say Ben Arthurs is my pick.
Yeah, his games come absolutely leap and bounds the past 2 years. Not only the goals he scores, which people look at, the assists and the work that he does for the players around him. He's somebody that can play up top on his own. He can play with players around him and be a support option as well. And he is actually our top assister this season. I think he's got 13 in total, which, for a big centre forward it's a very valuable quality to have. And yeah, from that point of view, last season, for me, he was a pretty clear winner of PIL Player of the Year. I thought he was the best player in the league. This season, it's harder to call because there are so many good players in the championship that can play at the top level. You've got that many clubs in the race. There's been no clear favourite for the entirety of this season. And I certainly couldn't see any player sort of getting a hog of the votes. If we could go into Premiership as well, Player of the Year, probably Andy Ryan would have to be up there for me. Kyle McLean as well. And then probably another Larne player. Maybe, Levi Ives, he's been very impressive.
He was my pick and has been for a while. I think perhaps it will be Ryan or Ives, joined by McLean and probably Ronan Hale. But again, pick your lot there. I think McLean's the one guarantee, in my point of view, to be in the three. And it's probably... it's likely he could win it. I think it's the Laurie versus Miller debate from last year. It's McLean versus the Larne player, or as you said, there could be two Larne players in there. But my pick's probably Ives, but I don't think I'm crying if it's Ryan or McLean. To be honest, whoever it may be, I think they're probably the three in my view. So look, they'll come out this week, and we'll see if we have time during the week to cover them. Let's chat PIL. That's quite thrilling as well. Doesn't get as much love, but we're now sitting here. A lot of teams, again, it's a lot mixed. 23 games played, 24 games played. Is it 26 in total in this division that you play?
Yeah.
So a couple of teams only have 3 or 2 games left. Right now, it's Limavady who are sitting top of the league. They played 23 games, 49 points. Armagh City, who, what a turnaround. They're the institute of this league, really, after such a bad season last year. 2 games to go, 1 point behind. They're 24 played, 48 points. 5 wins in a row from the foreign table. Rathryland coming up. It'll probably be too little too late for them, and just the amount of games played, but that's impressive for them to be there. And I know you were tipping Queens to do well earlier on in the season. It hasn't really worked out for them. A couple of bad results against PSNI, who look to be all but bottom. I don't know if I can say relegated, but bottom. And some people will be surprised now. There's 3 games to go, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen for Ballymacash. What's happened there after being so impressive and being in that dogfight with Bangor last year? Was losing the likes of Zach Barr and the rest just a killer blow?
I think it's just a symbol of a competitive season. There's been no massive decline at Ballymacash. Certainly, they're still right in the hunt. But I was looking at potentially teams that could be up there or thereabouts, and Limavady certainly with a full season under Paul Owens were certainly one of my picks, and the players that they recruited in the summer window, the likes of your Ian Parkhills and such like, and the attacking options that they had, even getting the likes of Kyra Friel and Michael McCrudden in on deals in the January window were incredible bits of business on the face of it.
From a PIL point of view, the Limavady side feels like a super team with Pomeroy and Ian Parkhill in there as well.
Yeah.
Lewis Tosh is a 20-year-old player. He's got 9 goals. What a great goal from Pomeroy as well. It's that little shimmy in, and then dangling it in. Like I shared that as well. Like Limavady are the story of this season, really, aren't they?
Yeah, I was impressed by what I saw of them last season, certainly in terms of their style of football. They are a team that like to get the ball on the ground and play it. And Paul Owens, who's obviously worked closely with Oran Kearney at Coleraine before he went back to Limavady to take the top job there. He's done great work there. And it is a squad that I think probably last season needed a bit more experience, and they got the likes of Ian Parkhill and Graham Crown and a few top players that are probably a little bit higher up the age spectrum, and I think it's worked well for them. Armagh City, fair play to them. They've kept faith in Shay Campbell, who's been in the dugout for some time there now, and certainly reaping the rewards of it. And Rathfriland, their first season in Irish League football, it's certainly been a very impressive one. They were going great. I watched them in the Bob Radcliffe final against Money Slane, and they were absolutely levels above, really good footballing side. Ali Wilson, the manager, since departed his role. Ronnie Hockey, the former Banbridge Town assistant, is now in charge there, and they've had a really, really good footing in Irish League football, even if it's maybe not quite enough in the end to go up. And they are a club that has ambitions to progress, and you can see that with the players that they have, the likes of your Rory Fitzpatricks and your Matty Holloways, who've really taken the bull by the horns, and player like Andy Kilmartin, who I think he's 41, 42 years old, but that Bob Radcliffe finally was running the show, really good at the base of midfield and controlling the play, and just a really experienced head to have in there. So I've been impressed by what I've seen of Rathfriland and the way that they've played their football. And Ballymacash, they're going to be there or thereabouts. They want to challenge for senior football, and you can bank on them going right to however long they can go, they'll go for it. Probably I would fancy Limavady to win the league still, just with the quality that they have and
the game in hand, I think.
Yeah, on Armagh, and just their scoring power. I've not seen a team in the PIL with that much, attacking Arsenal. It is genuinely, it's a very formidable unit to try and play against, and you'd hardly bank on keeping a clean sheet against them. But any which way, I do see them as favourites to see it up and return to senior football at the end of the season.
And similarly, if it's either Limavady or Armagh, basing on that it might just be too late for a push for Rathfriland to try and turn around a 6 and 5 point deficit they have in third. I think they might be favourites in a playoff against either, looks like it's going to be Dergview, but Dergview or Ards.
Yeah, Ards are, I think they're on the cusp of safety. I think a win would have done the job for them at the weekend there,
Yeah.
but they ended up drawing with Newington, so they'll need to go a bit longer to mathematically secure their survival. But it looks like Dergview are tough. They're a tough team to play against. Particularly on their own patch. It is a tricky pitch to play on, and they are a physical team. They're a team that'll, on a compact pitch like that, they'll make the game tight and narrow. And against a PIL team, they're going to have to match that physicality when they go to Dara Park and try and get a result there. Obviously, with the way the playoffs are structured, the first leg will be at the PIL ground. So that's the chance I think for whoever gets the playoff. You probably favour Armagh just at the moment. And it's a really good synthetic surface at home park, that's suited to playing football. So I think the key will be in that first leg and just setting up the footing, lead them into the second leg, because I think it will be a clash of contrasting styles in that playoff, which makes it all the more intriguing.
Well, a lot of talk about the lower divisions, but I think Lewis, that's what's great about having you on. You're so knowledgeable, you're so passionate, and up and down the league. So yeah, that's how we're set up going into what is just a fascinating couple of games up and down across all of football. Again, this is deep dive, and then if we keep going down with PSNI, and we all know that the situation with PSNI last year and them finishing last, but ultimately not being relegated, and then a brand new division pretty much being formed in the PIL or a reformatting of it. I imagine there'll be teams that will want to work their way up and get up in the same way that Rathryland and Stuart Dallas's former club Cook United got their way up. Any indication about some of the teams that might at least give it a go to move their way up? That's of course pending, and if there is even an opportunity to move up in the PIL this coming summer.
Yeah, I've had my eyes on the amateur league quite a bit this season.
I'm sure you
It's
have.
very competitive. You've got the likes of Crumlin Star, who've went very deep in the cup competitions this year. Steel and Sons final, they're in the intermediate cup final.
Belfast side, of course.
Yeah, and then you've East Belfast, who are currently top of the amateur league and have been in very good form consistently throughout the season. So potentially, end of the season, they could stake their claim to have third tier football come to Inverary in the new year. Yeah, it's I follow the amateur league because it is competitive, and it is a good standard of football, and it's in a good place. I think when you see all these amateur league teams when they're getting into the major finals, major intermediate finals. So I have liked the look of Crumlin Star. They're a team that can play good football, and they've obviously got Eddie Patterson involved in the setup there as well. Somebody who's very well known in Irish league circles, an Irish Cup winner. Yes, they've got a lot of games in hand, but they will be determined to try and make up as much ground as they can. Even you've got the likes of Immaculata, likes of a Cumber Rec who are around there as well, that are very capable football teams as well. So it'll be interesting just to see how it pans out. And then obviously, you've got the likes of the Ballymena League, where you've got your St James's Swifts and your Donegal Celtics and your Belfast Celtics who'll be ambitious to try and get up there as well. Because obviously, they're in footballing heartland of West Belfast that doesn't really have an Irish League representation. So it is interesting, just to see how it materializes. And then all likelihood is it'll be a playoff for that last place.
Tuesday night is what's ahead of us. I appreciate potentially some of these games have been played by the time you're listening to this, but still plenty to play for on the line. 3 games to go. It will come down to 2 come 10 o'clock or so on Tuesday night. So what do we have on offer? There is discussions that this will actually be available to view, that the BBC is going to offer the opportunity for people to view a couple of these games in a bit of a digital offering. So that will be exciting and something new. I think kind of similar to what we had at the end of the season last year. But the games that are on offer, and we'll speed through these because we went very, very long. We've got Ballymena against Glenavon, North Belfast Derby at Seaview, the Swifts against Loughgall, which you talked about, at Stangmore, Glentoran. Could they be the fly in the ointment for Larne at the Oval? Linfield Coleraine, interesting game there. And of course, Newry's time in the Premiership could all be wrapped up against Carrick. Coleraine could be difficult for Linfield, I think, at Windsor Park. It just depends if they potentially make things interesting. That's the game that stands out to me, outside of maybe the ones at the bottom of the league with Newry and Ballymena.
The two for me, focusing on that title race, obviously it's Glentoran, Larne and Linfield Coleraine. It'll be clear after that, I think, going into, as I say, the game leading up into Windsor Park. I think both teams will just be absolutely determined to win at all costs. It doesn't matter how well they play or how badly they play. They just need 3 points. So for that reason, I would fancy Larne to beat Glentoran and Linfield to beat Coleraine, because I just think they'll be in that mode. They'll just be absolutely determined to keep pace with the other. They'll keep it to the back of their minds, of course, but I do see Larne. I'm going to go Larne 2-1 against Glentoran. I think Glentoran might make it uncomfortable towards the end, but I do think Larne just have a bit too much in the tank, having built back up a bit of momentum with the big win over Cliftonville. I think Larne will have a little bit too much. Linfield Coleraine, obviously, you think back to Coleraine hammering Linfield 3-0 in the game at the showgrounds, but I do think Linfield will have a bit more in the tank this time around, so I'm going to go 2-0 Linfield in that one.
I think Larne should win out against Glentoran. I don't see that as much of a potential banana skin as Coleraine going to Linfield could be, but again, if Linfield get 1 or 2 goals to the good, perhaps that will not be as much as a potential issue for the Blues there, as I'm happing it up. I've got to say Larne 3-0 based on what we saw over the weekend. Linfield should be able to beat Coleraine. Worrying for Newry, I must say, so many of these games for Newry has been win or bust, but this really is the game. They've had a good record against Carrick Rangers. The last time they won at the showgrounds, I believe, was against Carrick Rangers in October 2022. Can they do it again? I don't think so. I think Carrick is going to win out on this, and I'm actually going to back Ballymena to maybe beat Glenavon, and that would be home and hosed. It's all over.
Yeah, I would fancy Carrick against Newry. I just think Carrick have a bit too much, and obviously, Europe's on their minds. They're trying to take down Loughgall from that 7th place, and I just think they do have that quality up top, and with the likes of Ben Tilney and Curtis Forsyth, who are 2 wing backs that can cause problems. I do think they'll have a bit too much, and I'll go for them to win 2-0. No, actually, I'll go 3-0 against Newry. Ballymena, yeah. And I'll go Ballymena Glenavon. I'll be less sure about that one because I do get, a wee bit of a sense that Glenavon are petering out a little. And their performance against Loughgall, it wasn't great, albeit a tricky place to go in any case. But I'll go for a draw. Ballymena 1, Glenavon 1.
And that's a brilliant result for Ballymena, as I've said. If Newry don't win out, Ballymena have great goal difference compared to Newry, so that will be significant if Newry don't win. The other side of that is Glenavon beat Ballymena and Newry City beat Carrick Rangers. Oh my, Saturday is going to be massive in that game between the two of them because it would only be a 2 points difference. There's obviously Crusaders against Cliftonville, but I mean, I don't know what that could be. I was at that game last year at Solitude, and it was 3-3. It was one of the best games I've seen in Irish League football, but it's just one of those. Could be lots of games, or it could feel like a pre-season. It's just very, very hard to predict. Lewis, so much knowledge, so much insight. I know a lot of people follow all the stuff that you do online because you're a great person to follow online with a bit of little Irish League gems. If they haven't already, how can they follow you and your work?
Yeah, so I am on Twitter, Twitter/X on at BennettLewis75. And you can also look up the Football Chatters blog. That's just footballchatters.co.uk. You'll find everything you need on the Irish League and more. I cover Premiership, Championship, PIL, bit of Amateur League, Ballymena League, whatever you're looking for, I'll have something on it. Northern Ireland as well. So footballchatters.co.uk, you can find my work there as well.
You have a hunger for football that just cannot be satiated. Lewis, great to have you on. Thanks for all your appearances on the podcast this season. All the best, and enjoy the final few games of the year.
Brilliant, Peter. Thanks for having me.
So, as you can imagine, I record this bit of the podcast just after the recording of the main bit of the podcast. I've sent my guests home digitally via Zoom, and something has crept into my mind that I want to talk to you about. So, it seems weird that I wouldn't talk to you before Monday, before the big game next week. It feels weird that the league could be signed, sealed, delivered. And as much as this looks like a crazy week for me, I'm going to try my best to try and sneak in a second podcast. I did this last year, covering the Tuesday night games and all the rest. So, if you are listening to this in the future, there might already be one out there. I have no clue when I'm going to record it. Who's it going to be? I'm going to get on my phone right now, and how quickly I can get it to you after those Tuesday night games. I imagine The earliest I could get a podcast to you would be Thursday, maybe even as late as Thursday evening, just when it comes to a bit of editing time. Maybe it might be a little compact because we've got a few things as well, like the football awards and all the rest. So this is not a promise that I will do it. This is I am going to try and do this, and I'm going to stick this out. Hopefully it'll push me to do that. To stick around this week, you might have already seen it, for potentially a second pod that will preview next weekend's games as well as the Monday night game, and cover the Tuesday night ones, because I might not be talking to you again until Wednesday next week, because you've got the game on the Monday and all the rest. So that's how it's looking. It's mad. The season's crazy, and like, obviously this is just me outside of my own free time recording it. So that's it. Hopefully I'll chat to you sometime this week. I'm going to squeeze in, thanks for listening, I'm going to squeeze in, please follow me on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter. It's Kicking Match and all those things, and so close to that little bumper number for me when it comes to being a subscriber, or the amount of subscribers on both Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. So if you want to be a subscriber, it's free, and it gets you the most up-to-date times when I upload the podcast. A bit like a week where I decide to do a second one, if I can try and sneak it in. If I can, we'll see. If I can't, I'll try and post it on Twitter. So follow me on Twitter, and I will keep you in the loop. I'm tired, this is busy, Irish League football's class. Chat soon.